be initially. No, I mean there is truth to the KMT's initial formation looking somewhat similar to. Well, I mean I wouldn't say similar to communism or anything like that, but like yeah, at first the nationalist movement was also a movement of change, moving away from colonial domination and reasserting. Remember, nationalist movements at this time, at this period, especially if they were colonial subjects, were liberatory movements. So the attitude presented, or even the initial reception, is going to be different. Anyway,
Lindsay Hilson reporting there. Well,
thank you for voting for Trump. We needed change. Yeah, dude. I'm sure you think I voted for Donald Trump. Come on.
Day seems to deliver another
Sean the Black. Thank you for the raid. Hope you had a good stream.
Bombshell from the Trump White House. Let's get more from our Washington correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan.
Well, no bombshell.
Houthi banner being an issue is literally diluted Western moral panic. Palestinians and Yemenis living under occupation, genocide can't be anti-Semitic to Israelis. Maybe only the other Jewish Palestinians and Yemenis, but not to their oppressors. Like slaves can't be racist to slave owners. I think regardless of the ways in which I think Norm Finkelstein has a really good take on this, and I stand by his analysis on the issue. But it still doesn't change the banner being a curse upon the Jews. You know what I mean? And it's funny to say this because I suspect that they will most likely change it regardless, just like the Hamas charter changed as well. Like, yes, on that side of the world, Jew and Zionism is a substitute for one another because of their experiences with Israel masquerading as a Jewish force and doing this for Judaism. Having said that, considering that the Hamas charter also changed in an effort to be more modern, in an effort to be broadly received as an emancipatory force rather than like a terror cell, which of course that didn't really happen, but I think that will be a similar situation with like the Ansar Allah movement as well. Now, of course, they would the Ansar Allah movement would have probably had an easier time talking about normalized relations with the Western world in the initial steps of the Biden administration as Biden moved to take them off the terror list, which he did, only to put them back on the terror list when Operation Prosperity Guardian started. You know, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. Don't know why we're talking about this, though.
Yeah, Matt, but it was interesting last night. Donald Trump in the White House was asked on multiple occasions if his peace talks with Putin would include Ukraine. And I have to say, he was non-committal.
Even if you rewrite the definition of racism like that, it's still prejudiced and wrong. What? No, anyone can be anti-Semitic? Oh my God. I don't disagree with you, chatter. I understand. But you're doing an anti-white racism is real argument right now, which is weird. Like, the fuck? And also, there's never been a moment where I've defended the Ansar Allah banner anyway. That's not the point. I do think it's indefensible. And not just from, like, the Western perspective. But if you want to understand the context in which these sorts of opinions manifest, I will also explain that to you as well. All right, can we just continue with this conversation?
Middle at best. At one point, a journalist pressed him on the matter. Do you view Ukraine, he was asked, as an equal partner in the peace process? The president looked stumped. It was as if he hadn't thought about that question. That's an interesting question, he said after musing for a while. I think they have to make peace, President Trump said. That was not a good war to go into. No sense from President Trump that Ukraine had no choice, that it was attacked by Russia. He was also asked at one point whether or not Ukraine would have to cede territory to make peace. And he said that Zelensky is going to have to do what he's going to have to do. And then at one point he said, yeah, I think they're going to get some of the land back. I think they will. Well, I was up on the Hill earlier trying to gauge reaction from senators as to the developments. As you can imagine, the Democrats are furious while the Republicans were torn between trying to be supportive of Ukraine and trying to be deferential to President Trump. Let's hear what some of them had to say. Is America betraying Ukraine?
President Trump, not America. Please make some distinction between the two. Secretary Hegseth has apparently said in a meeting that the door for Ukraine to be admitted to NATO is closed and that they will not be able to recover their sovereign territory. If you go back and read Donald Trump's Art of the Deal, you don't give up the most important negotiating points before you begin negotiations in earnest. For us to concede those as a country, for the Trump administration to concede those, would be a betrayal of the thousands of Ukrainians who have fought so bravely and died for their country's freedom.
But what about the concessions? Europe is saying, why give up things before you've even started the negotiation? That's a betrayal.
In my conversations with President Trump, he wants Russia to lose, he wants Ukraine to win, and he wants the war to end. So I know he's working hard to make that happen.
So the negotiations will definitely include Ukraine at their heart?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I believe that.
Okay, at what point, like, why would you even believe any of that, by the way? It's like, are the conversations featuring Palestinians and their needs? No. Are the conversations featuring, the conversations never feature the people that are outside of the American, outside of the American allegiances. Okay? They just don't care. I think it's crazy to think that, like, to act like what Trump says and what Trump does are directly in line with one another. I think it's silly to assume that they're going to give a shit about Ukrainians at all and what their actual opinions are or what their actual needs are. It never was the case. And I think that there is some cold hard truths to the way that Trump is operating, as is the case with many of the things that he says when it comes to American foreign policy. Something that I think I will have to repeat over and over and over and over again, as I did the first Trump administration. It's not correct. It's immoral, but it's the truth about American foreign policy. The only difference is it's stripped of the aesthetic reasons. It's stripped of the aesthetic permission structure that it creates for liberals. That's it. The greatest example that I use to this day is when Donald Trump turns around, when Donald Trump famously turned around and said, yeah, of course we're going to keep giving billions of dollars of weapons to Saudi Arabia. Who's going to buy the weapons? Do you have $1 billion? Of course I'm going to keep giving Saudi Arabia weapons. At the time, Saudi Arabia was doing a genocide in Yemen. Many of you probably didn't know that, but or at least the Hasan heads in here that have been around for a while were familiar with this. That is the position of the American State Department. The only difference is there's no need to shelter the American public from the truth. He's just openly stating what it is, what is the case.
that Ukraine can win, that it can push back to regain territory, but
the message yesterday was, you don't have the United States.
the message yesterday was weak and pathetic, kowtowing to Putin, bowing and scraping. President Trump seems to be an admirer of Vladimir Putin, which is a nice way to put it.
Is America still supporting Ukraine?
Senator Van Hollen, be glad to answer your questions.
Do you support Ukraine still?
I do.
Well, I certainly do. I'm very worried about what happened.
We both do.
Does America support Ukraine still?
I've said it was a mistake from the beginning to send $200 billion to Ukraine. I'm still opposed to sending more aid to Ukraine.
Well,
he's like, I've never been a supporter of the Ukraine. Why are you asking me that?
Last thing, President Trump reiterated that he does plan to meet Putin in Saudi Arabia. He said that Putin would also come here to Washington, D.C., and that he would go there to Moscow. He was asked at one point whether or not he would meet Zelensky in.
I think my most controversial opinion on this is that not dissimilar to what I've said about the Biden administration, knowing full well that the Trump administration was going to take the reins, or even the danger of the Trump administration coming back into power, the Biden camp should have packed all of this shit up. They should have packed it up in their own vision if they chose to do so, whether it be with Israel or whether it be with the Obama administration the first time around, ensuring that they put a Supreme Court appointment up there, no matter what the cost, considering that there was a likelihood that Trump might actually win and then do whatever he wants with the Supreme Court. Major mistake from the Democratic Party. Major issue with oversight. So even if you're a Dem, even if you're a NatSec Dem, okay, I certainly am not. But let's say there are some national security Democrats out there, okay? There's plenty of pro-NATO Democrats out there. There's plenty of NatSec Dems out there, okay? How do you look at this? How do you look at the situation and think, well, the Biden administration probably should have packed all of this stuff up to ensure that the Trump administration couldn't come in and actually seize the reins of power and deal with it in the way that they want to, okay? That's it. Same with Ukraine, same with Gaza, especially with Gaza, because there's a lot more power and influence that we have over Israel as opposed to power and influence that we have over Vladimir Putin, okay? A foreign adversary with his own needs, own material needs, and violent ambitions. That's it. That's my statement. So if you're here upset about Donald Trump assuming the role of assuming control over all of this foreign policy initiatives, remember that this only happened as a direct consequence of the Biden camp not actually doing what was necessary at the time when they had 3 years to change the dynamic, whether it be offering more weapons faster or directly meeting Russia and coming to the table and trying to facilitate some kind of ceasefire negotiation. Whether you believe that Russia will keep up their end of the bargain or not does not matter, because instead you just had no ceasefire and all war. Putin is going to reject the deal? I doubt it. I think that he has also incurred significant penalties, significant losses. So it is in his best interest as well to try and pack the situation up and solidify the boundaries of all of the territory that he annexed. I think that one of the biggest oversights in the Biden camp, from my perspective, was consistently saying, "Oh, we're not going to talk to Vladimir Putin. We're just not going to do that." Which was a lie. They did talk to Vladimir Putin. They talked to Russian envoys when there was a hostage negotiation at play. But they never talked to any sort of Russian envoys when it came down to facilitating a ceasefire. I think that was a major oversight from the Democratic Party once again.
In Ukraine, again, he looked puzzled and he said, well, I might. He wouldn't commit to that, Matt.
Siobhan, you're all over those corridors of power in Washington. Thanks very much indeed. Let's go to Chris in London.
Well, joining me now is Timothy Milovanov, Ukraine's former economy minister and president of the Kyiv School of Economics.
That could have happened only before the elections and maybe even before Brandon dropped out. No, that's what I'm saying. That's precisely what I'm saying. That is what I mean. Yes, that's why I said there were 3 years where the Biden camp could have actually. You know what's ironic? If the Biden camp actually went in and said, "No, we got to talk to the Russians," I suspect that the statement, the attitude from Fox News and the Republican right would most likely be, "Fuck these guys. They're doing Obama-style apologia tour for an enemy of America." Regardless of what Trump's rhetoric around this issue has been, except, they didn't do that anyway. So here we are. Anyway, this is still coulda, woulda, shouldas, and there's a lot of that, but it doesn't matter. So why do the Dems need to be nice? What do you mean? Need to be nice? I'm simply stating that if the Democrats had a different vision for Ukraine and how it should basically end, then they should have implemented it, or at least tried to implement it. I suspect that they don't have that much of a different vision from the Trump cabinet regardless, because American foreign policy is uniparty, and the marginal differences from the Republican administration and the Democratic one is that the Republican administration has a different way, especially with Trump, has a different way of pushing their agenda, and they oftentimes will go further right and become more reactionary and fuck things up even further and get more violent, regardless of what they say they're interested in doing. The only way that any kind of conflict ends is if it's an inevitability due to the conditions of the battlefield. Afghanistan withdrawal is a great example of this as well. Negotiated by Donald Trump, implemented by Joe Biden. Donald Trump turned around and shit all over Joe Biden. Joe Biden pulling out of Afghanistan while following the conditions set forth by the Trump administration. Why did we pull out of Afghanistan? It got to a point where it was just costly for no reason.
Ukraine could say no to whatever Donald Trump agrees with Vladimir Putin.
Well, there are minimal conditions for peace on Ukraine side. One of them is not ceding more territory unoccupied. The second one is some meaningful guarantees, security guarantees, because if those are not there, what is there to negotiate or agree to? Just accept Russian conditions.
Yeah, this is the most Ukrainian man alive, is what someone said in the chat, and I agree. His name is Timofeev.
So something, for Ukraine to sacrifice, to make painful sacrifices, whatever they are, I think it is important that Ukraine gets something back, and Ukraine is an independent country.
So it could say no. I mean, the US Defense Secretary is saying effectively Europe has to be the security guarantor for Ukraine. Now, this just comes a couple of days after President Zelensky said, well, that's just impossible.
Well, yes, indeed. President Zelensky said, and I think that's true, that full security guarantees, real security guarantees, which prevent Russia from invading in a couple of years again, are impossible without the United States being there. Europe can provide, 50, 70, 80% of all, but that's, the US has to be there. Otherwise, the war will restart or likely to restart soon. So, yes, that's correct. And I think we have to bring the US in some form.
Do you think most Ukrainians will see this as a betrayal?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Most people see it as betrayal right now in Ukraine. the US cannot be relied on. And also, President Trump appears to be very weak because he conceded to Russian demands before even getting anything out of it. So it looks like Putin has played President Trump. At least that's how it is seen from Ukraine.
It's also remarkable to hear politicians both in Europe and in Britain comparing this to appeasement.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think it is appeasement. Peace through strength. I haven't seen any strengths. No one has seen any strength.
I love when Asmongold supporters come in here and go, how is this guy not banned yet? One, I don't even think Asmongold agrees with you in terms of getting me banned. I would be shocked if he did. But two, like, what do you mean? What do you want? He's already the largest commentator on the platform, largest political commentator on the platform. You just want, like, no dissent whatsoever? No dissent? No leftist position to ever be reflected on this platform? Is that your argument? And if you're also not an Asmongold supporter and saying, how is this guy not banned? Then what is your expectation? Do you want Asmongold to be the only voice of politics on this platform? He already has developed quite the audience of right-wingers. What happened? I thought you guys hated cancel culture. Saying you are a leftist is a massive stretch. Who is a real leftist in your estimation? You personally say you hate Democrats. God, I love doing political commentary. The anti-capitalist leftist Democratic Party in the United States of America, as a person who is a critic of the Democratic Party for demanding that they do something, anything really. I myself am, of course, not a real leftist. Real leftists are the pro-Kamala, pro-Biden coalition that is currently doing what? Yelling at their base of support for demanding that they do things. Respect. Pro-Obama, I would say, is a leftist. M. Hud. Andre the Balkan, you are too stupid to navigate this type of conversation. Return to soccer talk and having a T-shaped hairline. American education. His name is Andre the Balkan. I don't think this is a American education, chatter. I have a full head of hair, man. Okay, the fact that he only responded to that means that he definitely has a T-shaped hairline. Respect. You can convert him here. He thinks the Democrats are leftist, dude. Okay, I don't think I can convert him. He thinks Obama is a leftist.
Strengths. People have seen weaknesses only in these negotiations, so to speak, negotiations, quote unquote. So we'll see what tomorrow brings. Maybe it's some kind of very complicated and brilliant strategy to appease Putin in terms of rhetoric, but then in practice provide Ukraine with real security guarantees. I think this will become very clear very soon.
But is there a realistic alternative to accepting whatever Trump negotiates, given how reliant Ukraine is on the United States to wage its war? I mean, could Ukraine go back to war without America?
Well, Ukraine is in war right now, and what the U.S. is offering is basically nothing, or Russia is offering. I'm actually not even convinced that Putin is willing to stop the war, or he's negotiating in any good faith. What is clear, I think, de facto to everyone, and President Zelensky has spoken about it, that getting territory back at this point is not realistic. It has to be done through some other measures in the future. Then NATO, frankly, even under the Biden administration, that has not been on the table. I think here, President Trump and Secretary Haggis, they basically say what they say what the Biden administration has been saying behind the doors, but not publicly. The U.S. doesn't want to see Ukraine in NATO. So on that front, I think it is okay. It's just reality. The real question is, will there be
what? This guy might be. Wait a minute. This guy might be a Russian operative who loves Vladimir Putin. I can't believe he said that. Wait a minute. This guy, but all of the drama farmers have told me that anyone who says those things is a Vladimir Putin supporter, like Hasan Piker, who's the #1 Vladimir Putin supporter of all time. It's interesting that the most Ukrainian man on the planet is also saying the exact same things that Vladimir Putin supporter Hasan Piker is saying. Hmm. Why didn't the U.S. want Ukraine to be a part of NATO under Biden or Trump? For the same exact reasons that France and Germany also didn't want it either. They had for America it's different, but for European countries, they already had a long-standing energy, energy partnership with Russia. They understood that this would be a red line that would be enforced by Russia if Ukraine was to be a part of NATO. Like, there is a level for global powers. There is a level of like how much they can enforce their will around the world. Like, there's still obviously some interests of foreign adversaries that they have to abide by. Like, that's it. Minsk agreements? No, that part doesn't really matter. Nobody ever fucking followed through on the Minsk agreements. People are so dumb, man. Why is asking the Ukrainians or the Palestinians what they would want be such a novel idea? That's never a point of consideration. Like, that's never a point of consideration. That's not how empire works.
Military and financial support for Ukraine? Will there be American weapons? And will there be any kind of troops in some form, in whatever form, to prevent Russia from invading in the future?
Exactly. I mean, if Ukraine were to reject a Trump offer of a deal and Trump pulled American weapons, can the war go on from Ukraine's point of view?
Yeah, it will. More people
Trump
will
is live
die.
with Modi, by the way, and we'll get to that after this video is over.
I think Russia will make some gains, but those will be incremental. I don't think there is any chance Russia or Ukraine will make any major movements on the front because the nature of this war with this asymmetric technology, with actually very cheap drones, is that making large advancements are very, very difficult, close to impossible. So I think even at a very low support level from Europe, Ukraine will be able to resist, but Russia will be making advancements.
Mr. Milovanov, thank you very much indeed. Matt.
Well, joining me now is Nina Khrushcheva, a professor for international relations based in New York and the granddaughter of the former Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. It's good to have you back on the program. Do you think Vladimir Putin, given this olive branch from the Trump White House, actually wants to end the war at the moment? Or do you think he's on a roll and wants to continue?
I think actually Putin he can end the war if conditions are fine, and it seems like now they're fine for him. He can end the war. He couldn't end this war if he's not a winner of it. He certainly could not be a loser. But now the winning can be presented because Trump called himself, apparently. We don't know exactly who requested the phone call, but it looks like it is Donald Trump. After
she inherited his good looks. She looks exactly like him.
Donald Trump was all complimentary, talking about Putin and himself as we, and then referring to Zelensky and potentially not necessarily very recent.
That is the most Russian-looking house I've ever seen in my entire dang life.
Respecting terms. So yes, I think he wouldn't mind if conditions are right for him. And for now, they do look right, although there is a very long road, as we all understand, from the conversation to the actual ending of this war.
And I mean, the Kremlin today actually, tried to reassure Zelensky that he would be involved in negotiations. And we heard similar sort of reassurances from the White House. Are those reassurances to the Ukrainians and to the Europeans to be believed, do you think?
Well, I think if Zelensky, I imagine, I don't know what exactly they're talking about, but for Putin and Trump, or for Trump and Putin, we don't know who is going to be the first in this scenario. If Zelensky behaves, that's fine. He can be there. But if Ukraine, and actually in your previous pieces on the subject, it does say the West is going to stand with Ukraine for as long as it does. But realistically, if the United States withdraws, there is absolutely very little possibility that the war continues. Yes, it's going to be withstanding Russians' offensives, but Russians are going to take more territory. So they would not mind having
not one picture on the wall, all mirrors. It's funny because it's like it's the only instance where there are so many mirrors that it actually has the opposite effect of what mirrors are supposed to do, which is make like the entire room larger, look larger, feel larger. But because there are so many mirrors of various different sizes, it ends up making the room look smaller.
Zelensky, but at the same time, we already heard Keith Kellogg saying that Ukraine needs elections. Is it a step to say that when we get to negotiations, it needs to be something else because Zelensky is too war president? He cannot be president of peace.
So do you think by calling for elections, they're kind of hoping that he would be voted out of office and someone more pliant might come in?
I would imagine, yes. I mean, I don't know what exactly they're thinking, but I would imagine that, if you insist on democracy, why are you not democratic? Why there is no elections? We even hear from Ukraine is that, Ukrainians themselves are now kind of concerned about Zelensky legitimacy, not in ideological way, the way Russians present it, but they themselves. I mean, because the war is not going too well. Zelensky promised that it will, and now it didn't. And, obviously the president will be guilty. So yes, but I'm not sure impliable, but somebody who is realistic, somebody you can have a conversation with, potentially Valery Zaluzhny, the Ukraine ambassador in London.
Right. I mean, the Europeans feel very kind of weakened by this. They feel as if they're the victims in this great power game. But they do have a card, don't they? They could fast forward Ukraine's EU membership, which is something that Vladimir Putin presumably would absolutely hate.
Well, the Russians said they wouldn't mind. I mean, I'm sure they mind it, but they really wouldn't mind because it's better than NATO. Yes, they can fast forward the EU membership, but then again, how realistically the country at war can be admitted into the European Union. So there is some card. But I mean, I have to say the fact that Europeans are so beaten up about the fact that Trump said what he said and the story goes the way it goes, it's kind of shocking to me because clearly they are not They're not thinking, or they're living in la la land. What did they think is going to happen? Trump is going to come in and say, oh, have all the weapons in the world. And they themselves really are not contributing as much as Trump would want, or America would want. And then they say, oh, no, but we are with Ukraine. Fine, be with Ukraine then. I mean, that's what Trump is saying. Be with Ukraine, do it on your own if you're all so brave.
Nina Khrushcheva, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
We could be at a turning point in the war in Ukraine. President Trump says that he and Vladimir Putin have agreed to start negotiating the end of the conflict. After speaking with Trump, Ukraine's president says no one wants peace more than Ukraine. Nancy Cordes is at the White House with the latest on this. Nancy, good morning. A lot of people are wondering if President Zelensky is involved in these conversations with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin.
Right, and President Trump left some question about that yesterday in the Oval Office, Gail. He did say he is serious about brokering a peace deal to end the war, but he also suggested Ukraine would have to make some big concessions and give up some territory, even though it was Russia that invaded unprovoked 3 years ago.
I, Tulsi Gabbard, do solemnly swear.
At the swearing in for his new director of national intelligence, President Trump said he and Russian President Vladimir Putin have big plans to meet and start negotiating.
We expect.
Watch Trump take Ukraine, the war stops, and 2 years later gives it to Russia as some sort of deal he made with Putin. Definitely something I can see Trump do since Ukraine isn't a part of the talks, it seems. No, I don't think that that'll happen. I think what'll happen is what he's been saying, which is that there will be some kind of security cooperation with Ukraine where I don't know if it'll be like mercenaries or private contractors or something. And he will extract as much natural resources out of Ukraine as possible in the process, which I think corresponds to the American agenda, the foreign policy agenda across the board in Ukraine, no matter who's in charge.
1 + 1, 11, and not 2. And this is the power of 11 that is going to work for the welfare of the human.
What the fuck?
मैं राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप का मेरे एक अच्छे मित्र का हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं कि हम फिर से एक बार प्रगति की राह पर नई ऊंचाइयों को छूने के लिए चल पड़ेंगे.
I once again thank my friend President Trump, and we together resolve that we will together march towards progress and towards prosperity for our nations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. He's doing a great job in India. Everybody talks about it. He's doing a really fantastic job. A great leader. Great leader.
Of course he loves Modi. Remember, foreign policy uniparty, it's not like the Democrats were anti-Modi either.
I thank you for your warm words, Mr. President, and I firmly believe that every person in India respects your sentiments.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Thanks a lot.
Any questions, please?
Yes, President. You are both very popular leaders in your respective countries. You've spoken about a common sense diplomatic doctrine. So what's a Trump-Modi doctrine that we should expect from the meetings today?
Trump doesn't know India is a part of BRICS. Trump thinks Spain is a part of BRICS.
Everything else will be the unity. We have great unity. We have great friendship, he and I and our countries. And I think it's only going to get closer. But it's very important that we remain united as countries. We're friends, and we're going to stay that way.
I don't like that we're watching this in real time and not watching the so sorry version of events that will inevitably be shown, which is probably going to be the real truth of the matter.
We do a really good job. We've done a fantastic job for the American people. We had a great 4 years, and we were interrupted by terrible administration, absolutely terrible. They didn't know what they were doing, and now we're putting it back together, and I think it's going to end up being much stronger than it was before, even much stronger than it was before.
President Trump, first of all, congratulations for the fantastic 24 days of your presidency. Historic and unprecedented decisions that you made, transformational reforms. I'm particularly impressed by the expose on USAID. And I would like you to share with us if you think USAID had a role in election interference in the US in 2020 and Indian elections in 2024.
So it could have had a role. There were a lot of bad things that happened in 2020. I think bad things happened in 2024, but it was too big to rig. We won by a tremendous margin. We won every swing state. We won the popular
This is my favorite thing that Trump does, when he just makes a foreign leader sit there and just responds to like the dumbest questions possible that have nothing to do with the foreign nation. And they just have to kind of sit there and be like, very cool. He does this every single time. It's amazing.
Well, but, we had a great 2016. We had a much better 2020 election, but bad things happened. And we had the best of all. We had, they say, the most consequential in history, 129 years, most consequential. So it was a great election. And it gives me a chance to work again with the Prime Minister and India. And we're going to have a great relationship together.
Mr. Prime Minister, प्रधानमंत्री जी कल प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप ने प्रेसिडेंट पुतिन से बात की है और युद्ध को रोकने की बात करी है आप हमेशा से
Do you see India playing a role in your plan to broker a peace in Ukraine? And if I could ask you about a development in your hometown today, the U.S. attorney has resigned over the DOJ's request to drop the case into Eric Adams. Did you personally request the Justice Department to drop that case?
No, I didn't. I know nothing about it. I did not. I think that, just to answer your other question, we're just going to get along well. We're going to get along with all countries. We're going to do very well. We're going to be doing, I think, record business, record numbers. And we're going to work with India also. We have some very big trade deals to announce in the very near future.
Mr. Prime Minister, कल प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप ने प्रेसिडेंट पुतिन से बात की है आप दुनिया के अकेले ऐसे लीडर हैं जिन्होंने प्रेसिडेंट पुतिन से मीटिंग की है प्रेसिडेंट जेलेंस्की से मीटिंग की है पहले प्रेसिडेंट बाइडेन से मिले और अब प्रेसिडेंट ट्रंप से मिले आपको लग रहा है कि जिस शांति की बात आप करते आए थे उसमें अब भारत रूस और यूक्रेन को युद्ध खत्म कराने के लिए अमेरिका के साथ
India is not at all involved in Ukraine is a crazy thing to say, considering that anytime there's sanctions, India becomes a secondary market to basically continue trade with the recipients of said sanctions. So no, they play a very formative role.
Soros, and what is the role that the deep state played in the situation in Bangladesh?
Well, there was no role for our deep state. It was
India is buying Russian oil to sell to the West, and the West is okay with that. Exactly.
For a long time, and has been worked on for hundreds of years. Frankly, I've been reading about it, but I will leave Bangladesh to the Prime Minister.
Oh, he's doing the Illuminati hand gesture chatter. You're right. Stay woke.
रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच का लड़ाई का सवाल है मुझे खुशी है कि राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप ने शांति के प्रयासों का इनिशिएटिव लेते हुए कल राष्ट्रपति पुतिन से बात की है दुनिया का एक सोच रही है कि भारत न्यूट्रल है भारत न्यूट्रल नहीं है भारत का अपना पक्ष है और भारत का पक्ष है शांति हम पहले दिन से ही और मैंने राष्ट्रपति पुतिन को उनकी मौजूदगी में मीडिया के सामने कहा था कि ये समय युद्ध का नहीं है और मेरा एक कन्विक्शन है कि समस्याओं का समाधान युद्ध के मैदानों में नहीं निकलता है वो टेबल पर चर्चा करके ही निकलता है
As far as the Russia-Ukraine conflict is concerned, I'm very happy that President Trump has taken initiatives to restore peace and had telephone calls with President Putin and President Zelensky. The world had this thinking that India somehow is a neutral country in this whole process, but this is not true. India has a side, and that side is of peace. From the very first day, I have been talking about the importance of dialogue and diplomacy and a peaceful solution. And when I met President Putin in the presence of media, I had told him that this is not the era of war. And I have firm conviction that problems cannot be resolved on the battlefield.
You're actually wrong. Our Sir Modi Vishwaguru ji actually stopped the war in Ukraine by telling both Russia and Ukraine that war is bad. My bad. My bad. He did do that.
Can you let him?
The BJP ran a campaign during the 2024 general elections where they said Modi stopped the war between Ukraine and Russia. He did. Dang, this chat is so racist. Wait, what's racist about?
And I think we went a long way toward getting a solution to the horrible war where so many people are being killed, especially soldiers on the battlefield.
I think you guys are misunderstanding. My chatters are making fun of the fascist hogs in India by explaining what the Modi campaign did that was a lie.
Tomorrow there's a meeting in Munich, and then next week there's a meeting
Also,
in Saudi
there's
Arabia.
Indian Hasanabi heads in here, including Arun.
Top officials, and Ukraine will be a part of it too. And we're going to see if we can end that war. That war is a horrible war. It's a vicious, bloody war. We want to end it. To your other question, that U.S. attorney was actually fired.
Also, saying that this community is hateful towards Indians is pretty funny. When, this is one of the few communities, as is the case with everything else, that actually tries to the best of their ability, combat anti-Indian sentiment. Anywhere else on the internet that you go to, as many of the Indian Hasanabi heads will openly admit, you can't even show an Indian person without literally the entirety of chat saying the most heinous, hateful shit possible. Like, it's crazy.
Big elements today of success. I call it an element of success. Reciprocal tariffs, so that somebody charges us, we charge them the same amount, which has never been done in our country before. We've always been taken advantage of by other
Some
countries.
Indian hogs think Trump is a secret Muslim. Oh, I love that.
We're not going to allow that any longer. So I think we're going to do very well. We've been doing they say the last 3 weeks was among the best 3 weeks.
That Nokia phone ringtone is basically bringing me back to my childhood. I haven't heard that shit since I left Turkey, dude.
Even the Prime Minister mentioned it. I think
Almost all of my phones were Nokia.
I just want to thank everybody
growing
for
up.
being here. This is a terrific man. We're going to make some wonderful trade deals for India and for the U.S. And thank you all very much. Thank you.
Gotta stand up. Drawing my head.
Are a lot of haters just people with a punish king who can only pay attention to the news if a daddy figure is yelling at them during it? Yes. All right. They're kicking the press out so they can make out. So they can kiss. All right. Let's get back to Trump and Pooty Poo.
That he'll come here and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia.
Russian troops currently control about 20% of Ukrainian territory. Trump suggested Russia deserves to keep some of it as part of any deal.
They took a lot of land, and
Russia deserves to keep a little bit of land. Come on, guys. Once again, ridiculous statement being said openly. The quiet part out loud. That's it.
And they fought for that land, and they lost a lot of.
Like I like that he's presenting it as a pro-Russian position. Like he's saying it like, well, you know, they fought hard for that land. They deserve to keep it, which is a ridiculous way to communicate what's going on. And the obvious way to communicate what's going on would be, yeah, if you want to end this, if you want to end this endless conflict where people are dying nonstop, then you're going to have to make concessions. I can't control Vladimir Putin. He's a foreign adversary. and we're going to try to make sure that we have the best possible deal for the Ukrainians. But instead, because he's Trump, he's just like, they fought fair is fair. They fought long and hard. At least he stays consistent being pro-Russia and pro-Israel. I mean, true. He's like, yeah, might is right, folks. Lame ass take. You clearly don't have any respect for the long-lived institution of finders keepers. Yeah. Like, he could just be like, listen, it's a fucking meat grinder, and the incredible amount of territorial seizure that Russia engaged in is completely unjustifiable, but there's nothing I can do about it. At the end of the day, you know, I don't want more Ukrainians to die, do you? That could be a reasonable position that he could arrive at. Instead, him being Donald Trump turns around and says, guess what? Russia fought really hard for this land, and they called dibs. So we're going to give it to them.
They lost a lot of soldiers.
It was a big shift from his predecessor's public position.
I want to be very clear about this. The United States will never recognize Russia's claims on Ukraine's sovereign territory.
Speaking in Brussels, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth dealt another blow to Ukraine's ambitions.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement.
Like, this is not a blow. That's not a blow at all. That's just a reaffirmation of the truth. It's like if you presented Anthony Blinken coming out and saying that Taiwan is a part of China, which is the long-standing American position, okay? And then being like, this is a real blow to the liberatory efforts in Taiwan. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I hate Pete Hegseth, but him mentioning that as the official position is not a change in our commitment. That's not, it's ridiculous.
Democratic Senator Chris Coons argued all of this hurts Ukraine's bargaining position.
Secretary Hegseth should reread The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump, because it is the worst possible negotiation.
Yeah, I think they're mostly angry on the aesthetic grounds. Like, look, walks back his statement yesterday that a negotiated settlement is not likely to end Ukraine and NATO. These negotiations are led by real Donald Trump. Everything is on the table. In his conversation with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky, what he decides to allow or not is at the purview of the leader of the free world, President Trump. So I'm not going to stand at this podium and declare what President Trump will do or won't do, what will be in or what will be out, what concessions will be made or what concessions are not made. But him openly stating that at most is causing anger and division amongst the national security apparatus, because they're like, well, why are you saying it out loud? That's it. That's it. Even though they have said it on numerous occasions through both back channels and also openly to the media. Donald Trump has also said that, and so have previous administrations as well.
To give away two of the most important deal points before they even start negotiations.
Trump's new Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, did send a pro-Ukraine message while meeting in Kyiv with President Vladimir Zelensky.
We believe. Sometimes it feels like liberals want the administration to lie to them. You know what I mean? They're like, why aren't you just like lying? Why are you saying what is like already the official policy? Why are you openly admitting that? Like, why can't you just lie to us and whisper sweet nothings into our ear? I wanted to clarify, I'm an Indian Hasan. I've had two. The racist comments were referring to some of the chats about the interpreters' accents and why Modi doesn't speak English. Modi does speak English. Many Indians speak English, Modi included. He just doesn't speak English in that official setting, I suspect. Modi probably speaks better English than like 50% of Americans. Most Indians speak better English than most Americans. India is the largest English-speaking country on the planet. Okay, you are reaching. I mean, Modi speaks significantly worse English than his predecessors. Lots of Indian leaders don't speak English well, and that's fine. No, not the second largest. India is the largest English-speaking country on the planet. It's a second language, obviously. That's a reach. I'm sorry. Wait, what? No. No, I think there are more English. There's a larger English-speaking population in India, even though it is the second language. Or wait, is it? Total English speakers? No, this is no, not as a. I think there's more. I don't think this is correct. I think there's more English speakers in India. This is rigged. They're lying. They're lying and claiming that there's less Indians that speak English. I don't believe this. By total numbers, I thought India was the number one. Some dumbass just said British. It's British English, so it doesn't count. Okay, that wasn't a dumbass. That was correct. You were just given the facts. I don't believe it. Okay, it's fake news. Guess what? Guess what? Figures are from the 2022 American Community Survey, 5-year estimates by the U.S. Census Bureau for persons ages up to 5 and older. 2024 estimate figures for population in first, second, and third languages. English as a first language is only spoken by 259,000 people, as a second language by 182 million, and as a third language by 45 million. It's not just British colonialization, by the way. English is used as a link language for all the ethnic groups of India, especially in South India. We all speak English to one another. We're thinking of China for the highest number of English speakers? No. It's not China, even though China does have a significant number of English as a second language speakers, I think. It's not China at all. It's mixed. It is mixed. Plenty of Sri Lankan and Indian immigrants here in Japan speak either English or American English, depending on their home schools. When have you heard a fully Indian person from India in India speaking good English? What are you talking about? Yeah, but most of them are illiterate at it, just like everyone else's second language. I love when a fucking dumbass Westoid. I love when a dumbass Westoid who barely is legible, barely literate, is talking shit, okay? Is talking shit about Indian dudes in fucking India knowing like 4 languages off the rip, okay? Just fully just letting their freak flag fly up in this bitch. Respect, dude. Jesus Christ. Oh, do they have an accent? I guess they're not literate then. That's what he means, by the way. Is that the dudes have an accent. So they're not actually literate in English. Law, such a weird hill to die on, Hasan. Why do you have to lie? About what? I mean, I'm memeing when I say it's India's number one in English speaking. I'll concede that I'm wrong on this, that America has more English speakers than India does, for sure. But as far as like an impressive number of Indians speaking English, like that is just the fact. Also, Yeah, why do you think the H-1B visa conversation is about like Indian tech workers? What the fuck? Why do you think? It's because a shit ton of Indians speak English. The list with the first, second language is the list with the first, second, third language speakers is India, US, Pakistan, Nigeria, Philippines. Damn, Pinoy gang, rise up. According to available data, around 12% of the Indian population speaks English. It is important to note that English is not the first language for the majority of Indians. It is primarily spoken as a second language. No, English is not the most spoken language in India. Hindi is the language with the most significant number of speakers, making 43.63% of the population. However, English remains an important language in India as an official language and is widely used in education and politics. If you ever watch code tutorial videos in Hindi, you can understand like half of the video because they switch back and forth from Hindi to English so much. Robin Banks, thank you for the 10 gifted subs, by the way. That Hindi statistic is also misleading. It's not actually 46%. Hold on. Doors open. Hindu nationalists are fudging the numbers. I can see that. The Hindi statistic is also misleading. It's not actually 46%. It's much lower than that. The Indian government just calls a bunch of languages Hindi. That makes sense. I can see that. All right, let's get back to Vladimir Zelensky.
That this is an important signal to the world, to the Russian leadership, that we stand together.
But back in D.C., Trump was non-committal when asked if he viewed Zelensky as an equal partner in negotiations with him and Putin.
What do you say to people who think that Trump is a Russian/Putin's puppet? I say to them that they should keep believing that, because then they won't recognize that he is actually Xi Jinping's puppet. You had wrong information. Modi did not finish school, bro. That's why he doesn't speak English. And if you look at literacy rates in India, it varies by a wide margin on state-to-state basis. Even those Indians study English throughout school, verbal communication through English is very bad. I'm saying this as a South Indian. You had wrong information.
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace.
The White House yesterday revealed more details about the deal that led to the release of American schoolteacher Mark Fogel from a Russian prison. In exchange, we now know the Trump administration has agreed to send convicted money launderer Alexander Vinnik back to Russia. Vinnik was arrested in 2017 on charges of fraud using cryptocurrency. Tony.
Nancy, thank you very much.
Vladimir Putin responds to strength. In 2014, he invaded Crimea, not during the presidency of Donald Trump. Over 4 years, there was no Russian aggression from 2016 to 2020. In 2022, Vladimir Putin took aggression on Ukraine. Once again, not while President Trump was president of the United States. So any suggestion that President Trump is doing anything other than negotiating from a position of strength is on its face ahistorical and false. So when you look at what he may have to give or take, what's in or what's out in those negotiations, we have the perfect deal maker at the table from a position of strength to deal with both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. No one's going to get everything that they want. Understanding who committed the aggression in the first place. But I challenge anyone else to think of a world leader at this moment who, with credibility and strength, could bring those two leaders to the table and forge a durable peace that ultimately serves the interests of Ukraine, stops the killing and the death, which Trump has been clear he wants to do, and hopefully ultimately is guaranteed by strength of Europeans who are there prepared to back it up.
Why not invoke Article 5 then for the NATO peacekeeping forces that could potentially be deployed? How does that deter President Putin?
Well, I would say, I want to be clear about something as it pertains to NATO membership not being realistic outcome for negotiations. That's something that was stated as part of my remarks here, as part of a coordination with how we're executing these ongoing negotiations, which are led by President Trump. All of that said, these negotiations are led by President Trump. Everything is on the table in his conversations with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. What he decides to allow or not allow is at the purview of the leader of the free world, of President Trump. So I'm not going to stand at this podium and declare what President Trump will do or won't do, what will be in or what will be out, what concessions will be made or what concessions are not made. I can look, as our team has, at what's realistic, likely on an outcome. I think realism is an important part of the conversation that hasn't existed enough inside conversations amongst friends. But simply pointing out realism, like the borders won't be rolled back to what everybody would like them to be in 2014, is not a concession to Vladimir Putin. It's a recognition of the hard power realities on the ground after a lot of investment and sacrifice, first by the Ukrainians and then by allies, and then a realization that a negotiated peace is going to be some sort of demarcation that neither side wants. But it's not my job as the Secretary of Defense to define the parameters of the President of the United States.
Wait, what?
As
Isn't
he
it
leads
literally
some of the
his
most
job?
complex and consequential negotiations in the world.
So, Sean, on this problem for NATO, and it clearly is a problem, will they be reassured by what people...
It definitely is a part of his job. What the fuck? Nah, it's definitely a part of your job, man. No, he is a Fox News anchor. Okay, well, that remains true. Although he is a Fox News anchor, first and foremost, like, as it stands, as the secretary, as the head of the Defense Department, it's definitely a part of his job. Damn. Well, this is what happens in a DEI free zone, you know? Thank God we abolished DEI so we could put competent and effective leadership in charge so that they could say stuff like, oh, it's not my job. It's the job of the president, who is the glorious supreme leader.
Hegseth was saying that America remains committed to NATO.
One of the things that when I was listening through that, you can't help picking out that actually Pete Hegseth was making great...
I'm not saying the Defense Department is supposed to be making these decisions independent of the executive. I'm just simply stating that it definitely, when you communicate things like that, it comes across as though you have already had these conversations with the executive and you're just, you know, mentioning what the position of the leadership looks like, which I suspect he did anyway. And now he's just kind of falling on the proverbial sword because people are yelling at the admin. So yelling works? I mean, yelling is definitely worse to a certain degree with this administration that responds to negativity.
overtures to say how strong he thought NATO was, how he committed to NATO, and even President Trump was, because European leaders have been a little bit worried about whether Trump is going to walk away from it. But he was absolutely clear. Though he majored on this money side, he mentioned it on the defence industrial base that had to be there. I'm less worried about the 5% number that was going out there. President Trump's famous for doing stretching the elastic band pretty hard. And actually, even when he was asked about that in the news conference, he backpedaled about 5% and said, America's spending a lot more than this. But I suspect 3% is the actual number. The trouble is, I'm a veteran of the Cold War, and however much the European nations may worry about a number that's north of 2.5%, we were spending over 4% in the Cold War, and it feels like a more dangerous world. And we've had 35 years of not spending. So I think that message resonates, and we've still got, his point is, there's still a third of NATO members that are failing to pay the 2%. And what I think we're getting closer to is the point at which Mark Rutte has to turn around and go, you either pay or you don't enjoy the benefits. If you're not going to pay your premiums, you can't enjoy the benefits that NATO membership provides.
Right, and just briefly on Ukraine itself, are they right to be worried that a deal could be done over their heads that involves giving away chunks of their territory?
I'm less worried about that at the moment because it's not entirely clear what President Trump's role is in this. America is not at war with Russia. Russia is at war with Ukraine. So what is exactly that actually he's negotiating with President Putin? I think one of the things will be he wants to distance himself from President Biden. He wants to say NATO's off the table, because Putin was clearly worried about NATO getting closer to Russia's border. And he also said that the issue of territory probably was an unrealistic ambition. And although everybody gasps at that...
These guys also always play catch-up, just like the rest of the world. Like, why was this never a point of contention or a point of consideration when Biden was president? Like, what? All of a sudden now they're like, oh, well, for Vladimir Putin, NATO was always off the table. Okay. Why are you saying that now? Was that not the case initially? I don't understand.
Most recent conversations that Sky's had with President Zelensky have turned around.
I know you're against Trump and Elon, but why is auditing the government seen as a bad thing? Because that's not what they're doing. Okay? If you think that they're quote unquote auditing the government to find like wasteful expenditures and fraud, you've fallen into the marketing campaign that isn't even like that good, really. Why is it that so many people refuse critical thinking or the very simple notion that your government officials, no matter what their background is, are most likely fucking lying to you when it's a goddamn Republican in charge? Everybody understands this reality when it's the fucking Democrats, but for some stupid reason, no one ever understands that the government officials have the capacity to lie to you just as the Democrats do when it's the goddamn Republicans doing it. All of the free thinkers, dude. This is before we consider that there is already a pre-existing service that audits the government regardless and is way better equipped at finding inefficiencies than a bunch of random dudes who are 19 years old on Adderall, fucking keyword searching woke and DEI. And just hitting delete.
man and said, look, he doesn't think that's reasonable. What I was a little bit concerned about was that Trump seems to have given away a few of his negotiating cards already. And I suspect that, President Trump has been making big overtures about Panama Canal, about Greenland, about Israel and Gaza. I suspect we've got to look beyond the rhetoric. And all of this, I suspect, is just using it as America focusing on China, UK and the EU sort out the continent.
On Russian state television, the tone was triumphant. An historic shift in relations was how this anchor described the phone call. Another told viewers to feel the difference. But officially, at least, Moscow's not celebrating yet. Russia's foreign minister even suggested the world has overreacted.
I was struck by the fact that the entire world has fallen into a kind of stupor. They were stunned when a normal, basic conversation between two well-mannered, polite people took place.
It's not that polite to invade your neighbour, but it seems Vladimir Putin will be rewarded, securing concessions on territory and NATO membership before peace talks have even begun. And then there's the prospect of another face-to-face meeting. Helsinki before, Saudi Arabia next, we're told, and then possibly Moscow. If Donald Trump does come to Moscow, it would be a very big win indeed for the Kremlin. Because ever since Russia invaded Ukraine nearly 3 years ago, the West has sought to isolate Vladimir Putin and cast him as a pariah. But the image of him shaking hands with the American president here in the Russian capital would shatter that altogether. Plenty to chew over then at Moscow's California diner, where opinions are split on how many should be at the table.
Well, it doesn't depend on only two presidents. There should be at least three sides. The other side should also agree to this.
I am for negotiations. I really like that at least bridges are being built for these negotiations. And I think that it is very useful for everyone.
Ukraine would beg to differ. Fast food and fast diplomacy is not to everyone's tastes. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
Just after the morning rush hour, central Munich. Scenes that pour fuel on Germany's political disputes over immigration, with the far right soaring in the polls ahead of the most significant general election since reunification. A child's pram and a shoe lie crushed in the street. 28 people rushed to hospital after someone, later confirmed to be a failed Afghan asylum seeker, had rammed his car into a crowd.
A car crashed into the back of a demonstration. We saw the whole thing. They were walking along the whole street, and when they crossed the intersection, a car drove into the back of the crowd.
As an arrest video emerged, the German Chancellor was forced to comment on the divisive issue currently haunting German politics. The alleged attacker, who'd come to Germany as an unaccompanied minor, reportedly had his asylum application rejected nearly a decade ago. So why was he still in the country?
This perpetrator cannot count on any leniency. He must be punished and he must leave the country.
He'd also reportedly been in trouble with the police for drugs and theft, but whether he was operating alone or part of a group isn't yet known.
At the moment, we can neither rule out nor confirm other perpetrators. There are no leads at the moment. The background is currently being investigated.
There have been several lethal attacks by newcomers to Germany in the last few years. 6 died when a Saudi man drove into a Christmas market in Magdeburg.
Okay, the Saudi man was literally an anti-Islam AfD supporter and was not a newcomer to Germany. That's crazy. This, of course, is going to absolutely ignite the same fear-mongering that already existed, which is truly beneficial for AfD's purposes in general.
Nuremberg. He turned out to be a far-right anti-Islam activist who'd renounced his faith. Still, Germany's insurgent far-right party, the AfD, say these acts of extreme violence are precisely why their controversial policy of re-migration is so popular. The AfD leader, Alice Weidel, who's been courting support from Hungarian hardliner Viktor Orban, today repeated her Trumpian demands for mass deportations to reverse the immigration started by Angela Merkel in 2015.
Meine Pflichten.
The AfD...
It's crazy because I said this yesterday. Like I just said, everyone in Western Europe has made fun of Viktor Orban, and every single country is going to have little Viktor Orbans prop up left and right. Terrifying predicament. What should Germans do about the terror attacks? I mean, it's always the same. Violence is violence, chatter. You address the needs of the population. That's it. Unless you're asking that question because you personally think that like there is something different to the Islamic style violence that's taken place or some shit. You know? Contrary to the initial information, the suspect had a residence and work permit. This was reported in German media at 8:17. This deportation agitation in German media was completely off the rails today. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that makes sense because it plays a role in propping up the most like right-wing positions possible. The media loves hitting the panic drums. Social Democrats have failed to fight fascism. In many cases, helped accelerate it while being the most smug, out-of-touch people on the planet. Yeah.
They are currently polling second, but are unlikely to assume power as Germany's main parties refuse to work with them. Meanwhile, to Munich enter US Vice President J.D. Vance and a multitude of other world leaders for the Global Security Conference. On the agenda, Russia, the Middle East, and much more. But today's carnage provokes more immediate questions, for it also emerged this afternoon that police had foiled an attempted bomb attack on an asylum shelter near Dresden by someone described as a German national. How will today's events affect the election in 10 days' time?
Hamas says it will move forward with the next hostage release Saturday as part of the ceasefire deal with Israel. This comes as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is threatening to end the ceasefire if Hamas doesn't free all 9 living hostages it agreed to release in phase 1 of the agreement. Now Hamas says Egyptian and Qatari mediators will work to, quote, remove obstacles and close gaps to allow the exchange to happen. Foreign correspondent Britt Clennett joins me live from Jerusalem. Britt, what's the latest on this ceasefire deal and this pending exchange of hostages and Palestinian prisoners? And what are these obstacles that still have to be removed?
Hi, Diane. Yeah, positive signs that this will go ahead as planned. Hamas saying that it is committed to implementing the ceasefire deal and will continue releasing the hostages within the agreed time frame. That follows talks in Cairo, Hamas, and saying that Egyptian and Qatari mediators had decided, as you say, to remove obstacles to the deal. There was no immediate comment from Israel. Obviously, both sides up until now have been accusing each other of violating the ceasefire deal, and there was a lot of concern from both major stakeholders.
This article confirms the misinfo before and explains more. Please read so people know Chatter was right. Summary at the top. Germany Munich car attack injures 30. Suspect detained. At least 30 people were injured after a car drove into a trade union march in Munich. Chancellor Olaf Scholz has called for the suspect, an Afghan national legally in Germany, to be deported. Police say the suspected perpetrator, an Afghan national, was detained at the scene. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has called for the suspect to be deported. Opposition leader Friedrich Merz said something has to change. The Taliban say they are prepared to cooperate on deportations in return for consular presence in Germany. Contrary to earlier reports, Bavarian ministers have said that the suspect was not subject to deportation and was in possession of a valid residency permit. Weidel says under the AfD, the man wouldn't have been here in the first place. Alice Weidel, the chancellor candidate for the far-right Alternative for Deutschland, has insisted that the 24-year-old Afghan national detained on suspicion of driving his car into a trade union march in Munich on Thursday would have never entered Germany had her party been in power. Weidel placed the blame for the incident at the door of the Bavarian premier, Markus Söder, saying the question which politicians need to face, especially Söder, is what was the man even doing here? These guys, I think, get so horny anytime an instance of mass violence occurs. They're like, oh, hell yeah, it's time. It's time to use this as our opportunity. Why didn't the media cover the Swedish mass shooter? Because he was white. The media did cover it. The media did cover it, but just briefly. And unfortunately, the reality of the matter is that right-wing sentiment is what dominates polite discourse and just discourse in general. Yeah. When it's a far-right white guy doing an act of terror, then it's like, oh, well, it's a lone wolf. Why are you politicizing this? There's nothing to be said about the right-wing radicalization. When it's a random Muslim person, okay, or an Afghan refugee, they're like, oh, this is how they all are. Notice that nobody says this is how they all are about white people, obviously, because that's not the case. Just like that's not the case for the millions of Muslim refugees that work and live normal lives in Germany every single day, in spite of the anti-Islam sentiment that you hear from many German politicians.
The Gazans, who have endured more than a year of suffering, and the hostage family.
Don't spread misinfo. There's no known agenda yet. The Deutsche Welle article is misleading. He doesn't have permanent residency. In fact, his asylum application got rejected at first. He had a restricted residency, and he was only allowed to stay by formality because they didn't decide whether they will extend his residency. Yeah. The Swedish fella disappeared from the news. Yeah. The initial coverage also had like photos of like a random Arab looking person too. And then, yeah, when they realized the dude was white, they were like, okay, never mind. My B. Sorry about that. Anyway. I'm not saying this is like there is a intrinsic quality to violence that only impacts like white people or some shit. I'm not saying that at all. I'm simply explaining that everyone is capable of violence. Okay? Right wingers, specifically, are very capable of violence. And oftentimes, what? Can you address repeating mass murders in Germany without calling people racist, fascists? This is becoming disrespectful for non-immigrants. White people are also humans, you know? I love that right-wingers pretend that the only solution to an act of terror is by being Islamophobic. Like that's you're making it seem as though if you fucking say, you know, this is just Islam, this is how all Muslims are, then you magically solve this fucking problem. You're an idiot. What are you talking about? Yes. People ask me, how do you fix this problem? And I tell them it's the same principle. All instances of violence like this, with the exception of like the antisocial personality disorder caused instances of violence, are solvable through addressing the material problems that people have. Okay, this is not a unique position. This is just the truth. That's it. Also, this guy said white people are human too, as though I, a white man, don't think that.
Families who say that time is running out to release their loved ones. We spoke to Edith Ahel. She's the mother of Alon, who is still held in Gaza. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
I feel bound by myself. I think I can't do anything with it. I have no control over that. I have to be positive for Alon, and I am.
Wait, it's not Muslims from India, Pakistan, Indonesia, etc. It's always Middle Easterners. Yo, this is my goat. Is this an Indian Muslim who says like violence only happens? This is a hyper specific. This is an advanced form of racism that I had not encountered before. Is this guy an Indian Muslim who says like, nah, you don't understand. It's only the MENA Muslims that do this shit. That's awesome. I mean, this is cool. I cherish this kind of thing. This new versions of racism when all the previous versions of racism are outdated. Respect. I love that. The funniest and coolest thing that I also encounter is that the overwhelming majority of like insanely white supremacist accounts are run by like Indian dudes or like dudes from Malaysia. Like Radio Genoa. Being like, we need to make sure that the West maintains its white superiority. And the dude is just Indian. The dude saying that is an Indian guy. Amazing. Wait, why'd you ban this guy? He's popping up. I want to hear more from this guy. Indian racism hits different. It's like while virtually every other type of racist despises Indians very openly and in the grossest ways possible. There was a chatter who earlier said that they are Indian and Muslim. and they've gotten far more hatred for being Indian than being Muslim online. Because for some reason, like, racists really fucking hate Indian people. But then you got Indian people who are doing their own version of racism, not oblivious to the ways in which white supremacists despise them, but still, like, they will just consistently maintain the position that, like, they are the true Aryans and that they're basically white. And they always have the coolest, newest type of bigotry that I've never encountered. It's unironically, as a racism sommelier, I do find it fascinating. Like, it is truly fascinating. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of the way that Turkish hogs operate too, because they're always like, we're not Arab. We're above that. Are you kidding me? We're a superior race. We're Turks. And Somalis do this a little bit too, for sure. If that's what you're talking about, unless you're making a joke about me saying racism sommelier, like a wine connoisseur. I'm a racism connoisseur. Turks do this all the time as well, not realizing that the Western world does not see them as white at all. Or they'll get like really mad. Really interesting dynamic.
I'm doing everything in my power to make sure that I am okay and that I am continuing to fight for him, do advocacy and everything I need to do.
I'm a racism sommelier is wild. No, it's not. It's just the truth, man. I'm a connoisseur.
That he comes home. But in that situation, I try to take care of myself and I try to be positive and faithful and with a lot of hope that this will come over and they will not forget, not him and not the other hostages that are still in Gaza.
They're very much relieved that her son is still alive because she got word from two of the other hostages who were in the last release that he is alive but in bad conditions, they said. At the same time, she wants to sustain pressure on the authorities and make sure that this ceasefire holds so that her son can come out, as well as the 70-plus hostages still held in Gaza. Remember, there are 6 Americans also still held in Gaza.
Britt, meanwhile, U.S. officials could face international warrants if steps are taken to displace Palestinians in Gaza. The International Criminal Court has jurisdictions over Palestinian territories there. So what are you watching for on that front?
Yeah, so if this plan goes ahead, if steps are taken,
that'd be so
certainly
sick.
The ICC says that U.S. officials could face arrest and prosecution, but the experts we speak to say that Americans are pretty much buffered from it because they don't recognize ICC jurisdiction. However, one expert said that the court can issue arrest warrants for Americans whose actions in Gaza and the West Bank violate international law. Now, that can be the case if an ICC prosecutor investigation finds reasonable grounds, they say, to believe that specific individuals perpetrated crimes in those areas. So certainly...
Oh my God, I'm gonna nut. See, that's how you really fucking know when someone's a hater. Okay? None of this Yair Lapid bullshit where he was like, oh, I hate Benjamin Netanyahu, but also fuck the ICC. Like, no, dude. I welcome the International Criminal Court in following the letter of the law and potentially prosecuting American leadership for objectively what amounts to international crimes against humanity in their active defense of ethnic displacement. I'm with you, baby. I'm with you all day, every day. That's how you know when motherfuckers in Israel are like, oh, we're the opposition party, but we hate the ICC. Because how dare they say that the guy that we supposedly despise, Benjamin Netanyahu, is a war criminal. Yeah, you ain't with it. You're not a real one. I am. Apologize to liberals and support the international rules. First of all, I, unlike my liberal counterparts, am actually an advocate for international rules and laws. The problem is liberals are not an advocate for international rules and laws. I am. Yeah, it's funny to say that libs actually care about international law when, you know, Biden was a serial violator and also actively did genocide. America already lost. The ICC would never do this 10 years ago. Oh, yeah, 100%. The ICC even like saying that they could possibly do this is crazy.
Another layer of this, but the rights groups that we speak to say that really the concern should be on this being raised in the first place and the chaos that it's sowing here and how it is compromising the deal.
All right, foreign correspondent Britt Clennett in Jerusalem, thank you.
A judge has cleared the way for the buyout offer for more than 2 million federal workers, rejecting a lawsuit that had put that plan on hold, and scores of federal workers are already being fired. Senior political correspondent Rachel Scott is at the White House. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning. Well, dozens of lawsuits have been filed, but this does mark the first major victory for the Trump administration. A judge declaring that buyout program can move forward. And this morning, the offer is officially closed.
Overnight, a stark message from Elon Musk.
So what you do every day is stuff your face and spew out propaganda. This is what you have to be, guys, to make bread nowadays. Endgame dystopia. Even if you grasp the idea that peace can be achieved without ensuing chaos into it, you will still have a sour taste in your mouth. It can't just be that simple to be, right? What? Why can't you just operate on the fucking limitations of your brain processing power? Why do you have to act like you're much smarter than you actually are? Virtually everyone understands that you said nothing, okay? Endgame dystopia. Oh my God, this guy stuffs his face and spews out propaganda. Just speak normal, okay? As far as stuffing my face, yes, dude, I'm a human being. And within the hours of 2 p.m. Pacific to 4 p.m. Pacific, you can catch me eating food, okay? I'm live for 7 hours a day minimum, okay? And yes, in that 7-hour block, there's going to be moments where I'm eating. That's number one. Number two, in terms of spewing propaganda, what am I talking about? What have I said that you consider propaganda in a pejorative way? What have I said that you consider to be wrong? Why can't you address any of the things I'm saying and instead, I don't know, complain about me eating food? Do you think that the International Criminal Court should not actually try to hold America accountable? Do you think that the current American president saying we are going to forcibly displace 2 million ethnic indigenous Palestinians from their ancestral homelands is not, to the exact definition, a genocidal ambition? That's it. That's what it is. If that's not genocide, then there's no such thing as genocide. Also, he unfollowed, so he can't even say anything now. No, he drafted this in a sad Discord server, and his fellow freaks hyped him up enough for to hit send. Yeah. Endlessly frustrating to have to contend with chatters that don't actually have like a discernible position on anything really, and they're just in here to shit spew. And it's not even the shit that they personally came up with. They're just basically reiterating something someone else has said, and they're not even remembering it correctly. It's very sad. Why won't more countries stand up against us? Because we're number one, baby. We're the most powerful nation on the planet.
insisting the U.S. needs to get rid of entire government agencies to make sure the changes last beyond President Trump's term.
If you don't remove the roots of the weed, then it's easy for the weed to grow back. But if you remove the roots of the weed, it doesn't stop weeds from ever growing back, but it makes it harder. So we have to really delete entire agencies, many of them.
The billionaire, who is one of the president's most powerful advisors, comparing it to a large-scale corporate turnaround he did at one of his own companies.
It's like a big company, like a big corporation, American Incorporated. And, just like with Twitter, there was a lot of stuff that was being done that was unnecessary.
The president has directed Musk and his team to significantly cut staffing and limit hiring across all federal agencies.
We have to make our government smaller, more efficient, more effective, and a lot less expensive.
This morning, the White House closing its buyout offer to some 2 million federal workers, with the choice to resign now or run the risk of being fired. A judge clearing the way for the program to move forward. The White House press secretary calling the decision the first of many legal wins for the president. But the judge did not weigh in on whether the program is legal, instead arguing the unions that brought the lawsuit don't have standing because they are not directly impacted, stating this is not sufficient. Those unions argue the president has no authority to make such an offer, but Trump telling me this week the Americans who opted in will be paid.
Can you personally guarantee that the workers who opt in to resign now will be paid through September?
They're getting their money, but they're getting a good deal. They're getting a big buyout.
Amid questions about transparency, Musk and his team have started to provide sporadic, sometimes vague updates about cuts to federal programs on a government website, which also directs Americans to the social media platform X, which Musk owns. One tab on the website states, receipts coming soon, no later than Valentine's Day. As the administration vows to root out corruption, his administration has ordered federal prosecutors to drop corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. And he has fired a string of inspector generals like Robert Storch, an independent watchdog at the Pentagon who searched for abuse, waste, and fraud.
When you just wholesale fire people like that without giving any reasons for doing it, it sends a message that that sort of oversight, that productive oversight, isn't really valued.
So Tesla, one of the companies that Elon Musk owns, is expected to be awarded a $400 million contract with the State Department to provide armored Tesla vehicles. I asked Musk directly about these possible conflicts of interest days ago. And
Yo. Give credit. Drop site. Wasn't that Drop Site's original reporting? That's crazy. Am I wrong, chat? Mainstream media does this thing. Mainstream media does this thing that I find very annoying when it's like independent investigative reporters that previously literally worked in mainstream outlets. When they break the stories, mainstream media will never give them credit. It is very annoying. They use a Ken Klippenstein too. It's very frustrating.
and he dismissed them, George.
Right, but we've never seen anything like this before, Rachel. A private citizen with this kind of power and these kind of conflicts profiting from the government as he's ordering cuts across the federal government. Meantime, we have the Department of Justice.
I think aside from like undermining America and like ruining America, one of the things that they're doing that is really frustrating for me is the transparent ways in which they are farming government coffers in broad daylight. And the dumbest coworkers you have are like, they're fighting corruption, they're fighting corruption, they're fighting fraud. Shut up, libtard. Why do you hate that they're fighting fraud? I bet you're paid by USAID to be gay. It's like, what are you saying? Like, they're doing it in front of you. They're doing it. They're not even hiding it. It's so fucking annoying.
Justice is also moving against New York.
Yeah, George, this lawsuit has been launched by Attorney General Pam Bondi. She accuses the state of New York of prioritizing those who are entering the country illegally over American citizens. She specifically highlights this law in New York that allows people to obtain a driver's license regardless of their status in the country. New York Governor Kathy Hochul responding, calling this a worthless, publicity-driven lawsuit, insisting New York is not backing down, George.
Great. Scott, thanks very much.
Now to the battle against soaring consumer prices. The newest read on the economy showing a higher than expected increase last month. Inflation rising 0.5%, the largest increase in 17 months. Those prices jumping as well. You know it. Rent, hotels, apartment costs up 4%, gas up nearly 2%. And of course, your week.
Damn, who could have foreseen this? Wait, you mean to tell me that the great deregulator is now in charge? And virtually every industry has immediately chosen to increase their prices. Some of that increase obviously is happening as a consequence of the avian flu. But make no mistake, it's not real as long as we just refuse to recognize it. Good thing that we're also undermining all of our regulatory agencies that are tasked with making sure that the food and the poultry that you consume is up to food safety standards. Good thing that that's no longer a thing, so you can actually get avian flu if you want. Oh, wonderful stuff. I love freedom. It's so joyous. Fantastic. As a massive chicken and egg consumer, when I die, at least I won't have to fucking experience the awful nonsense and the stupidity that I'm exposed to on a daily fucking basis.
Weekly grocery bills skyrocketing with the cost of eggs nearly double what they were just a year ago. Let's bring in our senior business correspondent, Christine Romans. Christine, good morning.
I eat the same thing pretty much every single day. Okay? I eat chicken for lunch and I eat eggs at night. I make a breakfast sandwich. I make breakfast for dinner. A very famous breakfast sandwich, as a matter of fact. I've made one for Austin as well in the past because he constantly, whenever he stays over, sees me making this fucking egg sando. And apparently for months, he has also wanted to eat it. Eggs in this economy? Still, how is that enough food for you? I mean, I eat a lot of chicken. 16 ounces of chicken to be exact.
He wants higher prices, obviously. How does one make financial plans around this? Is this short term? Is this here to stay?
You know, auto insurance, airfares, like you dig into these numbers, a lot of things are rising, and they're rising at an uncomfortable pace for a lot of people, and certainly an uncomfortable pace for the Federal Reserve, which wants to be lowering interest.
Okay, let's look at these wasteful expenditures.
That his Doge team discovered that FEMA sent $59 million to luxury hotels in New York City to house migrants, and that they took this money from American disaster relief, and instead of spending it on Americans, they spent it on immigrants, and that they were taking it back. People got fired over this. This is all a lie. And if you want to get better at telling people why the things that they are reposting from people like Elon Musk are not true, follow along. So to start, he's claiming that FEMA sent money for migrants. FEMA, like every organization that is given money by the government, has very strict rules of how they can spend money. So I'm already suspicious of this. Let me look it up. So I want to know, what are some FEMA programs for migrants? And this is what I see, the Shelter and Services Program. Let's click on that. So I click and see that this program was passed by Congress in 2023 under the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and it's to provide shelter and related activities to non-citizen migrants. So there's Musk's first lie. He's claiming this money is being spent on illegal migrants and on illegals when it's not. It's being spent on non-citizen migrants, and non-citizen migrants are someone who are here legally. Migrants are not the same thing.
Okay, but you have to remember, undocumented versus documented is a designation that can change at any given moment, and it is entirely up to how racist the person saying it is. That's it. This is what I tried to explain to people when J.D. Vance kept talking about how the Haitian, illegal alien Haitians were eating cats and dogs. They weren't illegally in the country. They had temporary protected status. They were, quite literally, documented non-citizens. Okay? They had the documentation. They had the paperwork. And yet, overnight, seemingly, the government decided that they were no longer documented because that's how it works. You can do it that easily. You can do it that easily when it comes to amnesty as well, by the way. That's the only difference between someone who is a documented immigrant versus an undocumented immigrant. The only difference is paperwork. And that can change. Not that it matters.
Thing as undocumented immigrants, and the two are constantly used interchangeably when they don't mean the same thing. Migrants enter through a legal port of entry. They are here legally, and they are awaiting their case to be heard in the U.S. immigration system.
CNN formal news conference is live, taking questions. Trump said he can't understand a word the Indian reporter is saying.
We'll do a few questions, please. Please, go ahead. Please, go ahead. Yeah, blue shirt.
Thank you, Mr. President. People in India will naturally welcome your decision to extradite Tahabu Rana to India back home. In that context, I would like to ask you a question about, in last few years, we have seen several groups in the U.S. raising anti-India voice, calling about separation, terrorism activities in India. Do you think that should continue here in the U.S. as well?
You're going to have to go louder.
Mr. President, people in India would be welcoming your decision to extradite Tahabu Rana to...
I can't understand a word he's saying.
May I, sir? May I? May I, sir?
Oh, my God.
Go ahead, back there.
Mr. President, thank you. First, I want to ask
Thank you very much.
a question. You and the President, you both spoke about combating ISIS. You both sounded very exciting about this.
This got to be a Breitbart guy.
This partnership upcoming. And I was curious, how much more confident are you with President Trump leading this country that there will be peace through strength and you will have a successful partnership with the
United States? Dude, I hate this new formation! I hate it. They have these like fucking random Breitbart guys who are like, Mr. President, I have it on good authority that your dick is long and fat. Mr. President, can you tell me how hard you can blow out my fucking back walls, dude? I'm with the Nelk boys.
We're going to have a fantastic relationship. And it has been, look, the whole world's been set back over the
literally tens of years, decades of fucking journalism down the goddamn drain, okay? Straight up. Room filled to the fucking brim with industry plants that are like, Mr. President, I'm with the doo-doo caca coalition. You just gave us press access and you kicked out those fucking losers over at Associated Press. Now I have the standing position here and I'm here. Sir, will you give me permission to do tricks on it? Okay? Will you blast sweet ropes into my butthole, Mr. President? I'll freaking love you, dog. I don't even have a question. I'm here to just tell you that you're the great white hope. It's literally insane, okay? They're going to have fucking Asmongold in there being like, Mr. President, sir, will you make titties in video games larger? That's what we're doing. That's the next step. Mr. President, sir, Korean titties are dominating the American marketplace. Can we make sure that Western titties are also fappable in video games?
In India to bring him to justice.
But there are many other elements in the United States of America, particularly Khalistani separatists who've been working against Indian interests. How is the United States of America going to cooperate on that front with India? There have been allegations that have been leveled against
Will
India.
you let India assassinate